Ever feel like the debate between science and religion is kind of stuck? Like, we're still hashing out Scopes monkey trial stuff in the age of, gene editing.
It feels like a broken record sometimes.
Totally. But you're not alone if you feel that way. I mean, we're all familiar with that classic evolution versus creationism debate. But today, we're going deep on a perspective that actually tries to reconcile those two seemingly opposing views.
Oh, this should be good.
And it comes from, well, a bit of a surprising place, you could say.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Lay it on me.
We're diving into a collection of essays that explore the Baha'i Faith's perspective on evolution.
The Bahá'í Faith. That's not one you hear about every day in this context.
Exactly. So if you're curious about how a religion can embrace both, like hardcore scientific findings and the concept of divine creation, well, buckle up, because this deep dive is going to challenge some assumptions.
I'm ready. Hit me with it.
Okay, so before we get into the specifics of what the Baha'i view actually is, let's rewind the clock a bit. Imagine it's the 19th century. Darwin drops his bombshell theory of evolution. How do you think people reacted back then?
Oh, man. I mean, pre-Darwin, the dominant view was special creation, right?
Yeah.
Each species individually created by God, fixed, unchanging.
Right, there's a cosmic stamp collection. Each creature perfectly designed and placed just so.
Exactly. And then Darwin comes along and says, hold on, what if species actually change over time through this process called natural selection? It was a huge deal.
I bet. A complete clash of worldviews.
You said it. Religious folks felt like their entire belief system was crumbling, while scientists felt like religious dogma was holding back progress.
It's like that tension is baked right into the conversation, even now, right? This clash between scientific evidence and deeply held beliefs.
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, as you said, things were especially heated back then in the early 20th century.
So, picture this. Right in the thick of this fiery debate steps in this figure who offers a radical new perspective, Abdu'l-Baha, a central figure in the Baha'i faith.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
He's traveling the world, giving talks, and guess what he's advocating for?
Let me guess. Harmony between science and religion.
Ding, 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 you got it. But it wasn't just some vague, feel-good message, Abdu'l-Baha laid out some pretty specific principles.
Okay, so what were they? What did he actually say?
Well, one of the key things he emphasized was this idea that true religion and true science simply cannot contradict each other. Like, at their core, they have to be compatible.
So if they seem to clash, it's a problem with our understanding, not a problem with either science or religion itself. Interesting.
Right. He was basically saying that the universe is a coherent whole, that the divine and the material are two sides of the same coin.
Gotcha. So how does that apply to, the whole evolution debate?
Well, here's a really cool example. Abdu'l-Baha even used a passage from the Quran about the sun being stationary.
Wait, the sun being stationary? Didn't that seem to, totally contradict what scientists were saying back then?
Exactly. It seemed to fly in the face of everything they knew. But guess what? Centuries later, science caught up.
No way. So his interpretation ended up being right.
Yep. It wasn't that the Quran was wrong, it was that our scientific understanding just hadn't advanced enough yet to grasp the deeper meaning.
Okay, I'm hooked. So how does Abdu'l-Baha, being a devout believer, square all that with, Darwin's whole theory of evolution? How do those two things fit together?
Well, that is where it gets really, really interesting. Abdu'l-Baha fully accepted the fact of evolution, that species change over time.
Okay, so far so good, right?
But he didn't necessarily buy into all of Darwin's theory.
Oh, tell me more. This is where it gets juicy.
Hold on to your hats, folks, because next time we're going to dive into how Abdu'l-Baha's unique understanding of species and essence challenged some conventional evolutionary thinking.
So last time, we left off with this intriguing idea that Abdu'l-Baha accepted the fact of evolution, but not necessarily all of Darwin's theory.
Yeah, there was something different about his understanding of species and essence. It had something to do with ancient Greek and Persian philosophy, right?
Right. It's a bit of a head spinner, I'll admit. But to put it simply, Abdu'l-Baha believed each species has a unique and unchanging essence in the spiritual realm.
Okay, so there's this spiritual blueprint for each species.
That's a great way to put it. And evolution is basically the material manifestation of those essences unfolding over time.
So it's the essence is the blueprint, and the physical species we see are buildings being constructed according to that plan.
That's a fantastic analogy. You're getting it. The blueprint exists before the building, but the actual building takes time and a process to be constructed.
Whoa. Okay, so evolution is happening, but it's being guided by this pre-existing spiritual plan. That's a pretty different take than like random mutation and survival of the fittest, right?
Yeah. Exactly. It's a very different way of looking at things. Some Baha'i thinkers actually call this parallel evolution, where each species evolves along its own unique line, guided by that spiritual essence.
Hold on a sec. So like, are you saying humans and chimpanzees evolved totally separately? Like, no common ancestor? How does that square with, all the evidence we have from genetics and fossils?
That's a great question, and honestly, it's one that has sparked a lot of discussion, even within the Baha'i community itself. Not all Baha'i scholars take Abdu'l-Baha's statements on this, literally.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it seems like a tough thing to reconcile.
It is. The essays we're exploring actually bring up a really challenging question for Baha'is. Do we cling to a specific interpretation of a religious text, even if it bumps up against scientific findings? Or do we kind of shift our focus to those underlying principles, like the idea that creation has a purpose, that humanity has a special role, and allow our scientific understanding to, evolve?
Wow. That's a pretty big question. And it's one we see popping up all over the place these days, right? How do we hold on to what we believe while staying open to new information and ideas?
Yeah, it's a real balancing act. And it speaks to a really cool concept in the Bahá'í Faith, the idea of relative truth.
Relative truth. Tell me more about that.
So basically, it acknowledges that religious truths are eternal, but the way we understand them can change as our knowledge grows.
I like that. It's almost like our understanding deepens over time, just like science does. New discoveries lead to new insights, and maybe even a new understanding of those eternal truths.
Exactly. It's like a constant unfolding. And that's what makes the Baha'i approach so refreshing, I think. This dynamic interplay between science and religion, where each can inform and enrich the other. It's about using both reason and revelation to get a fuller picture of reality.
Okay, I get that. It's about staying open and curious and using all the tools we have to explore these big questions. But this parallel evolution thing, I'm still kind of stuck on that. Like, how could it actually work in practice? How do you explain the similarities we see between different life forms, especially between humans and other primates? If each species is evolving along its own separate track, shouldn't we be radically different?
That's a great point. And to understand that, we need to bring in another layer of Abdu'l-Baha's thinking, his concept of a hierarchy of existence. Gets a little complex, but bear with me.
I'm all ears.
So he draws on some ancient philosophical ideas to suggest that while different species may evolve along these parallel lines, they all share a common origin in the sense that they emanate from the same divine source. It's like different branches growing from the same trunk of a tree.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. So there's this underlying unity, but also diversity in how that unity expresses itself.
Exactly. And that's a core principle in the Baha'i Faith, this idea of unity and diversity.
So it's not just about reconciling science and religion, it's about reconciling different aspects of reality itself. The material and the spiritual, the individual and the collective, right?
You nailed it. And that's what makes this whole perspective so compelling, I think. It's not just about answering specific scientific questions. It's about offering a framework for understanding our place in this vast, incredible universe.
So it's like saying to science, hey, keep doing your thing. We're not trying to stifle your curiosity or dismiss your discoveries, but let's also acknowledge that there might be more to the story than what we can measure or observe right now.
You got it. And that's where the idea of revelation comes in. It's not seen as contradicting science, but as offering a different way of knowing things, one that deals with questions of meaning, purpose, and values.
It's almost like having two different toolboxes, right?
Yeah.
Science helps us figure out the how, while religion helps us grapple with the why.
Perfect analogy. And both are essential for navigating this crazy thing we call life.
Okay, so this Baha'i perspective seems to offer a pretty sophisticated approach to reconciling evolution and creation. But I gotta ask, how does it deal with the thornier aspects of Darwin's theory, like natural selection and survival of the fittest? Because honestly, those ideas can seem pretty harsh, maybe even a little heartless.
Yeah, I get that. They can seem brutal. But Abdu'l-Baha acknowledged the role of natural selection in the process. He just saw it as operating within this larger framework of divine guidance. It's not just about random chance and cutthroat competition.
So there's a purpose, even amidst all the struggle.
Exactly. And that purpose is the development of ever more complex and conscious beings. And humanity, in this view, is seen as the peak of this whole long evolutionary process.
Hold on. Doesn't that sound a bit, I don't know, anthropocentric? Like we're putting ourselves at the top of the cosmic pyramid.
I hear you. It's a valid concern. But it's important to understand what Abdu'l-Baha meant by humanity's special role. It's not about dominion over nature or exploiting other beings.
Okay, so what is it about then?
It's about recognizing our capacity for things like love, compassion, and spiritual understanding qualities that arguably set us apart from other species.
So it's not about being the strongest or smartest, but about embodying these higher, more spiritual qualities.
You got it. And those qualities aren't just nice-to-haves. They actually have evolutionary significance. They're what allow us to build civilizations, create art, and strive for a more just and peaceful world.
That's a pretty cool way of looking at it. It's like saying that love and compassion aren't just some fuzzy feelings, they're actually driving forces in the evolution of consciousness itself.
Exactly. But, we mentioned earlier that there are different interpretations of Abdu'l-Baha's teachings, even within the Baha'i community itself. I think it's worth circling back to that for a minute.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really important point. Because it highlights that even within a religious framework, there's room for different perspectives and ongoing conversation.
Absolutely. So, no, it's not like there's one official Baha'i position on evolution that everyone has to agree with. The essays we're looking at actually represent a range of viewpoints. Some scholars stick closer to the literal interpretation of Abdu'l-Baha's statements, while others see more room for, metaphorical or symbolic understandings.
And that's okay.
It's encouraged. The Bahá'í Faith is big on this idea of independent investigation of truth. It's not about blindly accepting what you're told, but about engaging in thoughtful reflection and open-minded inquiry.
I dig that. It's like saying, hey, here are some core principles, here are some teachings from our central figures. Now go out there and wrestle with these ideas. See how they resonate with your own understanding of science, religion, and the world around you.
Exactly. And it's that wrestling, that grappling with these big ideas that ultimately leads to deeper understanding. It's not about finding all the answers. It's about embracing the journey of exploration and discovery.
I love that. It's about the journey, not the destination. It's about being willing to ask the questions, even the tough or uncomfortable ones. And so far, we've been focusing mostly on how the Baha'i Faith views the past, the history of life on Earth. I'm curious to hear how this perspective shapes their view of the future. Where are we headed as a species? What does Baha'i thought have to say about the ongoing evolution of humanity?
That's a really good question. It gets to the heart of what the Baha'i Faith believes about, the whole point of existence, really.
Yeah, it's like if evolution is this ongoing process and humanity is the supposed culmination of it all, does that mean we've hit the end of the line?
Not at all.
Yeah.
In the Baha'i view, evolution doesn't just stop with us. It keeps going.
Okay, but how? I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine what could possibly come after humans,
Well, think of it this way. Just like biological evolution led to the emergence of new species, spiritual evolution can lead to the emergence of new levels of consciousness and understanding.
Whoa. So it's like we're just at the beginning of a whole new chapter. Like maybe we're on the verge of some kind of, a new era of human development. One where our capacity for love and compassion and unity can keep expanding.
Exactly. And that evolution isn't just happening on an individual level, it's happening on a collective level too.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, the Baha'i teachings talk about the unification of humanity as kind of the next big step in our evolution, like the creation of a global civilization where peace and justice and sustainability are the driving forces.
So it's not about random mutations and survival of the fittest anymore. It's about conscious choice, about working together to create a better future.
You got it. And that's where the idea of free will comes in. We're not just puppets on strings, We're active participants in this whole incredible unfolding of creation. We have the power to choose love over hate, to choose unity over division, to actually contribute to the evolution of consciousness itself.
That's a really powerful idea.
It is. It's empowering, right? It reminds us that we're not just products of our past, but creators of our future.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored this fascinating Baha'i perspective on evolution, touched on concepts like parallel evolution, the role of natural selection, this beautiful idea of unity and diversity, and this inspiring vision of humanity's ongoing spiritual evolution. What does it all mean for you, dear listener? What sticks with you from this conversation? What resonates?
Maybe it makes you think about where you fit into this whole grand scheme of things. Like, what choices are you making that are actually contributing to the evolution of consciousness, both in your own life and in the world around you?
That's the big question, isn't it? We've looked at a perspective that sees harmony, not conflict, between science and faith. A perspective that reminds us that our understanding of truth is always evolving, and that we have a part to play in this amazing story of creation. And maybe, most importantly, that love and unity are not just lofty ideals, but powerful forces that can actually shape the future.
If this deep dive sparked your curiosity about the Baha'i view, I encourage you to explore their writings further. They're full of incredible insights.
And remember Abdu'l-Bahá's powerful metaphor: man can fly with 2 wings, not with 1. Keep those wings of science and religion strong, and let's see where they take us. Until next time, happy deep diving, everyone.